So, Uncle Lalit wanted me to give an example about maybe thinking out of the box. So, I actually tried thinking, but only this came to my mind. So, prior to COVID, our local market, I mean, we just don't look at the local market much, but then in that we had coconut milk, king coconut water, and pulsamba. So then we use other marketing agencies to get opinions on our products, and so I always felt some always give the answer we need, and they are biased. So if we say that we like this, but can you all just give an answer, and they'll do all this, they'll charge us, and they'll do trials, all that, and always the answer comes, like what we like. So I always thought it can't be true. So due to this, our coconut oil was always neglected. So we were doing manufacturing under other brand names for other companies. So then COVID happened. All of a sudden, our local market was struggling, no sales, all the restaurants, hotels, all these places were shut down. So within 2 to 3 days, our local marketing division, I also stepped in, and we thought we'll try to sell products on Facebook and WhatsApp. So we'll use Messenger as a way of communicating and just test the market. And I also said this is a perfect time for us to test. The opportunities there to test putting coconut oil and test it. So a lot of people didn't like it, but then we went with it, and so that we can get the feedback of all the customers. So you won't believe, I just thought maybe we'll get 100 or something. Within 2 months we had more than 10,000 orders, and 65% orders for coconut oil. And because of this, we couldn't, for that particular division, of course, they were not even earning, so we were able to at least, pay their salaries because of that for the local marketing division. And this also, even our director board, it opened their eyes. They said, okay, we are going to list coconut oil in the market. And in end of this month, it will be listed in all the supermarkets in Sri Lanka. But if not, sometimes this was the best example I could come up with. So if this didn't happen, we wouldn't have never listed that product. We will be just manufacturing for other brand names. So I guess speculating sometimes and making use of an opportunity really helps. That's it.
Roshan, are you able to tell the technical thing of this? I'm not competent to. I understood the whole thing. What the technical process was? The technical process that.
What I understood from
will you come on? Roshan, come on. Great. They got 10.
What I understood from Arit, correct me if I'm right or wrong, is that during the COVID time, you all suddenly realized that your local market was virtually nothing. And one of your experiences was that when you asked researchers to do a product research, they always brought the reply that you wanted and not what was actually in the market. But then the question that popped in my head is, why did you all tell them what you wanted before asking them to research? Because then they will always bring that answer.
Or they just had a hunch?
No, he said they said this is what we would like to see, right?
They also want to know the product.
Yeah. So anyway, either way, but you had a hunch that all the time the reply they brought seemed not right, because it did not match with whatever your sales or whatever you were achieving, because if that was so good, then you should be achieving what should be achieved. Right. Am I right? Right? So because of that, when the lockdown came, everything came to a standstill. But then you have found an opportunity that popped up during the lockdown when you went viral in your marketing.
So normally, these people, they do like 1,000 people, they take a sample and they give us the results. So we were able to get 10,000 people. So this was the sample we gave to our director board, saying, look at the results. So that pushed them, because like that was the honest feedback, and people, they are still coming. So we have now started a delivery service because of this, which it's door-to-door delivery. So we have just cut the distribution. We don't go through distributors, we just do it ourselves. So that also has opened different avenues. So.
Because what you're saying is you have opened out a market of 10,000 that could also act as a referral to many others. I think your niche is doing that door-to-door delivery where people got used to during COVID. So even post-COVID, don't stop that, because that's your success model. Because when you go into a supermarket, they have 10 things to look at, and they will look at price, they will look at all kinds of things, and then make the selection. But here you are having a captive market which has come out of this COVID, which you can exploit on.
The battery is going down. So it was a marketing success. But you also had a researcher's prophecy hunch, a different kind of analysis was needed. Then, Yeah. And he took an apostolic plunge to do a new pioneering thing they have not done before, which involved risk. It could have failed. And the director board would have been they would have felt more safe with the traditional, isn't it? Yeah. All right. Amazing, no? If you have anything to add?
Sorry. No, it was we had different convictions in our board, and oftentimes they underestimated our own brand, let me put it that way. So this was a hands-on experience that we got testimonials from people, actually how the market responded to the product. So it was just excellent. And no one in the board could stand against it. It was the people speaking. So that's how God has been working in Silver Mills, because we have had many oppositions. Even a good idea we can't just introduce. But when we pray, God takes over and He makes it to happen in a way that is acceptable to everyone. So give glory and praise to God.
Please go back to your chart, this chart. Let's go through the things Aritra mentioned. We have two more now. 1, 2, 3, actually 5, isn't it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Now let's see diaconia, helps. Who serve? That's a second row. Main feature for them is humility because that helps. So in the church, deacon. What do you think of Nehemiah? Where do you first meet Nehemiah? Wise answer is in the Bible. Next answer is in the book of Nehemiah. As the king's butler. Now, it is said that, emperors those times were quite nasty fellows. So how did that emperor, what made him choose Nehemiah as his personal butler? You know, king's butler and king's baker can land in prison and one can die. So what made that king choose Nehemiah? There must have been some process, isn't it? Just the way when the Ishmaelites took to sell Joseph, who was sold for 30 pieces of silver, correct? 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 What's the right answer? 20 pieces of silver. When Joseph was taken, those Ishmaelite traders knew Joseph's caliber. He was a favored son of a patriarch. And they offered Joseph to Potiphar. Or 10 others were offered, and Potiphar chose Joseph. Because Joseph had to be inside his house, inside his bedroom and everything. And Joseph arose to be Potiphar's main man, looking after all Potiphar's affairs. At that time, unlike now, the Pharaoh would choose as his defense secretary his closest relative. Unlike now, of course. So Potiphar was the very closest to Potiphar. Potiphar was the closest relative to Pharaoh, and Joseph was positioned there. But of course, God was in it. Because Joseph had to get into another place where he meets king's butler, and that was in prison. So we can do a leadership call study. Lead your call. Will you say with me, lead your call? Joseph from father's son to Potiphar's favored manager, chief of staff. Thank you. And Potiphar himself is a powerful man. And then next preaching session, Joseph from there to the palace via the prison, isn't it? So how these things play out, and what was Joseph's actual heavenly job description is found in Psalm 105. It's all in the slides, but today we can't do all this. I am sure you are convinced that we should have at least 1 half day for this. Or we should never have a thing like this. Yeah. So, helps. Purpose. Work of service, cleaning, setup, administration, or details. What is the problem with this position? Monopolize, threaten when others arise, jealous about others who are more gifted. Generally, the diaconia people can do the same thing over and over again. Now, someone put these 2x2 chairs, isn't it? Clean floor, which of course is Auntie Hiranti's training of her, whom she trains. Yeah, I come last of all and sit in front anyway. And they do this day after day, and they do it gladly, giftedly. There's a touch of, it's clean, nice. Even in the, anywhere in the church, any toilet looks clean, nice. It's the diaconia, and the diaconia people are doing it gladly. When a diaconia person is doing it not gladly, you can see that, so many things. Yeah. Secular application, middle-level management, clerks, peons, all kinds of people, prone to jealousy, oppressed in the work field. I have forgotten to put down here, they must be appreciated. I have put it, second column, did you see? What do they need? Regular appreciation, because they are behind scenes. Their effort we use, we benefit from their effort, but you don't see them, isn't it? So once a year we give them a gift as people connected with the office. Yes. But here I'll step, or shall I go to the exhort comfort, fourth column? In Arithra's thing, he had to work with people whom he had to be wise, and isn't it? You had to be conciliatory and try do it. And there would have been a Barnabas who appealed to the board saying, let him have a chance. Was there a Barnabas like that? What about your dad? Yeah. Yeah, after all, you're a son of the house. No? So Barnabas' nature is, what is Barnabas' nature? Paul was a hot wall. Nobody wants to touch. I mean, he's a fiery fellow of the earth. And he comes to Jerusalem. And who befriends him? Barnabas. So this is a Barnabas situation, a venture that looked risky, but someone said, give the young man a chance. Is there another scripture that said that? Give the young man a chance? David told about Absalom, isn't it? David told Joab, save the young man's life, he said last of all. When the rebellion was on and Absalom started losing, David told Joab, I think, save his life. But Joab didn't listen, of course. Yeah. So Barnabases are very, very precious. They give the other person a chance. So look at Barnabas. The Greek word there is paraklesis. In paraklesis, you come alongside. What does paraklesis mean? You come alongside. For cheer, you come alongside. So pastor has to be a Barnabas, counselor. What do they need? Acceptance. Pastors can't operate without acceptance. I mean, you can't force pastoral care. Apostles really don't need acceptance because their realm of working is different. They pioneer things others haven't. But they need to know God said it. Otherwise, they'll pioneer foolish things. They need to know God said it. But pastors have to, the office has to be accepted. So Hebrews 13:17 says what? Will you read it, Romy? Hebrews 13:17. I think in this gift set, as far as that upstairs thing goes, most difficult offices of a pastor. They have to work with acceptance. Yeah. Of course, most of you here, I am your pastor, so I have worked long as a pastor that I won't give up till pastor works with relationships. No, you can't suspend relationships, isn't it? Relationships go on as long as you live. But there's another generation for whom I am only apostolic, maybe. I don't know. So there's Jahan and Teen is stepping in as pastors, and then you as pastoral leaders also. And we were looking at whether every Roshan brought this up, whether every family has a sense of a home visit, isn't it? Yeah. So we are looking at it. Yeah. We are looking at it. When the church is increasing, new people are coming. The older ones can't be neglected also. And we can't give up relationships also. Pastorate happens in relationships. Then we have to equip your generation to be pastors, teachers. Evangelism happens, it happens, isn't it? It happens by word of mouth, by relationship, it happens. Pastoring and teaching doesn't happen. It has to be intentional. So Barnabas, Come along. Huh? That's right. Please do.
Obey those who rule over you and be submissive, for they watch out for your souls as those who must give account. Let them do so with joy and not with grief, for that would be unprofitable for you.
Yeah, keep that on. We have about 70 pastors now. Besides, there are people, I can say, I watch over your soul. If things are not right with you, even before you tell me, I will know something is not right, you know. I have to only see you to say something is not right. That's a prophet's office, prophecy office, as well as a pastoral heart. So with our 70 pastors, I can only keep tab with Mahinda, that is Nishanta. Then if there is a Melangi said no, that there are, what are these fellows? Melangi said? You said somewhere. Huh? You said agreeing people, educated people, intelligent people, loyal, long-standing people, casual people and troublemakers. So even among pastors, there are people who are prone to trouble. There's a restlessness in them. Now Jesus said, come unto me that are weary and heavy laden, I will give you rest. But Jesus also said, take my yoke upon you, my yoke is easy, my burden is light, you will find rest. Jesus giving rest is one thing, finding rest in the ministry is another thing. So I have to know in our pastorate, those who are not in rest. So I have to keep a little, Hirantena, I have to keep extra watch on it. Otherwise, only the very senior Tamil people, I can really pastorally feel towards, check with them, phone them. You get what I mean? Because we also have a primary congregation, then we have a singular congregation. It has people whom Hirantena have known for a long time. Now Jahan and Tini are taking over some of them. So we have to take care that some of them get taken care of and they will transfer filial well-being to a younger executive pastors. So we are in that process. Then Hiranti started this next generational thing for 2 years in succession. We were, some of you came, isn't it? Next generation, Pastor Tom came at campsite. Now we have to find a way of doing it again. It's always good to have an outsider for it. He will. Have you been for a next generation thing at camp? Yeah. We had it almost once in 4 months, 6 months. We had it with Pastor Jerome Joseph. We had it with Tom. Who else? SIB? No. Yeah. So we are thinking again. Anyway, I am on this thing of coming alongside, encourager, valuable gift, abuse, cautious. Now we will take on Shiloma. Will you present your case study? This is different. What I told Shiloma and Dinesh Dinali is, how have you understood the character of God in the profession you are in here? Experiences.
When we were being slowly introduced into the legal profession as law students, one thing that we were told was that we're becoming a part of the oldest or maybe perhaps the second oldest profession. So I'm not one here to testify to the veracity of it, but we can all agree that it's one of the most oldest professions. So when Uncle...
You can't say most oldest. Either oldest or most oldest.
So it's one of the oldest professions. So when Uncle Lalit wanted me to share some of my experiences, I was actually thinking of what the profession meant and what it stood for. And I was wondering whether it was something that was only designed by humans or whether God had a specific design in it. Because if you think about the legal profession, it's essentially the process of administering justice. And justice is, I think, something which is very integral to God and the character of God. So I was looking at a few scriptures. If you see Deuteronomy 32:4, it says, "He is the rock, his works are perfect, and all his ways are just. A faithful God who does no wrong, upright and just is he." And Psalms 89:14 says, "Righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. Steadfast love and faithfulness go before you." So if you look at the legal profession, you see different applications of the law in many aspects of systems of government or in day-to-day life. If you take, for example, even the executive arm of government, you see that even every executive officer, they have legal advisors because they have to check before they act whether what they're doing is within the framework of the law. And if you take, in fact, the parliament, they're there to create legislation. And in the judiciary, they're trying to make sure that they bring into force apply those legislations, but also to ensure that justice is brought and that those legislations are also just and equitable in its application. And if you take the legal draftsmen, they're thinking about how to better regulate society by the application of laws. And whether it's the Attorney General's Department or any state institute, they will have legal officers or legal divisions which will tell them what law governs them and how far they can exercise their powers. And then you also have lawyers who work what we call in like the unofficial bar or the private bar. So this is not an exhaustive list, but it serves as a rough framework for us. So, but regardless of, yes, I kind of kept them out. I just mentioned the judiciary. So regardless of what the legal profession has become now, we can say that the original purpose that God intended for it was hinged on the process of justice. And whether it be, if we largely categorize legal actions, you can take them in as criminal actions and civil actions. And if you take criminal actions, it's about punishing wrongdoers or trying to correct them and trying to reform them and bring them back into society. Or if you take civil actions, it's about providing redress or relief to a person who has suffered some sort of loss or damage, or whether there is a civil wrong and you try to compensate that person. So in this setting, we have to ask the question, what does it mean to be a Christian legal professional? If you take the legal profession today, I think many wouldn't attach a sense of prestige to it because we all agree that we work in a fallen world with fallen system, with fallen people. And so when you speak to an ordinary common man, a lawyer is mostly perceived as a crook or someone who is just trying to advance their motives of gaining more money and things like that. So it's completely disconcerted with justice or with doing what is right. And in this light, the onus is, I think, on Christian legal professionals to redeem the profession from what it presently is and to from what it is at present to what God intended it to be. So if you take Psalms 82 verse...
Sorry, I won't be correcting others. Sorry,
that's all right. So if you take Psalm 82 verse 3, it says, "Give justice to the weak and the fatherless, maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute." And similarly in Isaiah 1:17, it says, "Learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, and plead the widow's cause." So when we live in a fallen world and we work in imperfect systems, we as Christian legal professionals always have to bear in mind that our duty is not just to do our job, but also to restore the faith in the system of justice. Whether it's your client, you do your best, but you do it in the system of justice that God shows you. And so in terms of 1 Corinthians 12:28, I was thinking it's more of a gift where you bring healing, but I think in terms of Uncle's diagram, I am wrong. I thought, like, when you talk about the legal profession, it's more of a healing ministry when you say you're correcting oppression, because when we saw in Isaiah 1:17, like, you bring justice. So whether it be in punishing wrongdoers or rehabilitating them, or in giving a sense of closure to a person who has suffered wrong or suffered some sort of loss of damage or loss to reputation, at another person's hand, you give them confidence that in a system of law, that their rights will be safeguarded, and you give them certain rights by law that they feel, even if something wrong is done to me, I will receive some sort of redress or relief. And I think the legal profession is not perceived as a ministry of mercy, but I would be daring enough to say that it has to be a ministry of mercy, because in Romans 12 verses 6 to 8 it says that one of the ministries was mercy. And so when you think about what God intended it to be, and for me it would be perhaps healing and serving people, and bringing mercy, showing compassion even in the way you judge people, in the way you deal with clients. You're always merciful, and not like, it's very difficult for a lawyer not to be legalistic and to always just have to think about the situation and the circumstance from which that person is coming. But I think that is something that we need to inculcate. And when you look at how divorced the practice is from healing and serving and mercy, I think then the burden shifts on to the Christian legal professionals to emulate those qualities and to restore the legal profession and the prestige attached to it in bringing Christ into that profession.
So the Lord is primary lawgiver, isn't it? Father, and the primary lawgiver is a father. So he must have given, so if you look at it, Shalom as all are not criminals. Most need to be safeguarded. So there's a ministry of compassion in law, as you rightly pointed out. Then James 2:14 says, mercy triumphs over justice. That is to say, because mercy has failed, that justice becomes a cage. So if we go about with the gospel, changing hearts because of the mercy of God, then justice automatically gets done. Enforcing justice is a hard task. So it must not make us hard. But enforcing justice is necessary. And in a world where those who are at the other end of execution of justice as police officers get so corrupt. But when I interact with the police, I find them, they are real shepherds. They are thinking of the roads, they know what's happening in the area, they are real shepherds on the road. They don't get encouragement in the right direction. So in my interactions I have tried to give them encouragement in the right direction and be a shepherd to them, who are shepherds on the road, isn't it? To direct traffic, to prevent trouble, even domestic abuse or any injustice first goes to them. They are first on call, like the intern house office in the ward. They are first on call, like the general practitioner. First disease comes there, including domestic abuse or whatever it is, first disease comes to the general practitioner. So the first violation of law comes to the police officer. So if we can practice mercy vigorously, that is share in the gospel, you know that in revival times the saloons, the taverns closed and crime rates went down, and those are recorded fruit of revival. So it may lessen your grief. Grief we know must be kept godly always, because godly grief gives us strength. Grief when it goes to vengeance, it's hurtful, harmful. Grief can go to vengeance. They deserve just deserts. but we have to operate on the side of mercy. So most of the people are not violators of law, but those who violate law cause grievous hurt, isn't it? Yeah, thank you. So in a Christian person's practice of law, being a law professional, you have to say to yourself, I am doing this for mercy's sake, as you rightly pointed out, and for healing's sake. So when you have to go through those thorny times, when injustice is happening before your eyes, and when it becomes part of your profession, like doctors doing abortion, it's terrible, isn't it? People who should be advising mom to never lose a baby, they are advocating and helping and recommending, because abortion in Sri Lanka is big business. So yeah, Germany has decided that most life-forming profession is teaching. So they pay their teachers the salaries of consultant physicians. So Germany has the highest paying rate for teachers, because they have said, because you teach from ear dot, you teach from ear dot. Whereas we as doctors or lawyers, we get to see people at the end of their trouble. So they pay well for teachers, and that seems to be how Germans' intellectual machinery is still so good. That's just I have a column there, I have a row there about teaching, lawyers, architects, engineers, the surveyors, who all keep a plumb line. Who all keep a, you know what a plumb line is. Surveyor says, this is yours, that part is not yours. Engineer has to put materials in the right proportion. It's all about right proportions. And a teacher can't say, darling, tell the 9 times table, 9 times 9 is, I think 99, teacher. Darling, you're quite there. You can't say things like that, isn't it? You have to say, that's not right. So when you have to say, that's not right, it can get into your personality also, having to say, that's not right. So we have to guard ourselves about that. Dinali, now you have to comment.
Yeah, so for those who are not in a business background, so basically accounts is where you have to be accountable to your owners and other stakeholders. And
some families' wife is the auditor.
Yes. And for auditors, basically you audit what the accountant has done and you monitor whether they have kept their integrity. So when Uncle Ali told me to identify God's characteristics in my field, the first thing that came to my mind was righteousness and integrity. So accounts is a field where you can window dress or you can edit numbers. You can just report whatever numbers you like. But as an accountant, you have to be righteous and you have to have integrity to make sure you report the right numbers. And also as an auditor, we have to check that this is right. And we had to report to the owner saying, yes, they have actually done their accounts according to the laws and accounting principles. So the next thing that came to my mind as an auditor was that we actually show mercy. Now, as you all know, accountants do make mistakes. We all make errors. And as auditors, we find these gaps and we help them improve this gap. We will tell, okay, these are your weaknesses and this is how you overcome it. Though we are strict when we have to be strict, we will always show mercy and be like, these are ways you can improve your processes and this is how you will overcome it. So these are the 2 characteristics that I thought of when I thought of my field.
So accountants keep doing
the transactions, they keep recording it in their books or in the systems, and then the auditors will come and check whether those transactions are correct. Yes.
So auditors have a different exam or what?
No, they'd have the same exams as the accountants, but their role is different, their purpose is different.
So if I may ask a personal question, why did you choose auditing rather than become accountant?
Okay, so for me personally, accountant, sometimes you are restricted to a certain industry or a certain process. But as auditor, you get an overall view of how a company works and different industries. So you are aware of how different industries do their accounts.
Thank you.
Yes.
God bless. So, if you look at this chart, I have put this kind of professionals in the teacher category. It may not be all right, but you know what I mean. They are those who keep plumb line kind of thing. Have I used the word plumb line there? Plumb line, yeah. They keep plumb line, isn't it? You know what I mean by keeping the plumb line, isn't it? Keep things straight. Yeah. We might have to think through, because now accountants have to be reasonably strict, teachers also, other than some subjects, whereas an architect can freely draw, if the client has money, of course. Also, it's a right brain thing. I mean, it's two brains working. Architects have mathematics as well as they have to imagine and picture. But engineers are very. Also, I have a theory that your profession can influence who you are. Also. I haven't thought. IT is also a profession, isn't it? IT work. So next time we will consider some of those things also. Yeah. Jehan, can you say how we can improve such a discussion? Then we go on to some prayer, prophecy. If you like to ask me some questions or your observation on my intention, I couldn't show you give me a minute, I'll show the lampstand. Shall we get the lampstands on? Now the whole, one aspect of this is that you're a lamp on Christ's lampstand. And Christ gives a lampstand to a community that has got birthed as a church. So each one who gets added, we want to do the best for the lamp they have, because that lamp is from the Lord. So church is the city upon the hill. Now, how do we get this has both. Can you see the hill? How many hills are there? How many hills are there? 7. Then out of the hill, can you see Jesus redeems, Jesus calls those whom he wanted to be with him. Mark 3:14, he desired them to be with him. And then he calls them to be the city upon the hill. And I have portrayed it as the lampstand. Now do you understand why I portrayed it as the lampstand? Where Jesus walks among the lampstands. Those are the offices Jesus has. Gifts and callings. So should we call it calling, gift, or office? What in your thinking, what do you prefer? What God has put into you. You remember the family and the business? Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. That's family. But immediately, thy kingdom come. That is kingdom. So we are a family doing kingdom, business or government. If you say kingdom, government, that becomes even more, yeah. So, do we call it call, gift, office? In fact, it's all three. It's all three. You are not waiting for a prophecy time. Sorry, I was going to ask you. Call, gift, office. So, it is actually all three. So it's not one or the other. It's a call for which there's a gift, and then office is your placement. You can't be just running around with the gift, no? You're placed in your office. Yeah. Other one, if you look at the other one, then hold on. Then you are called to the city upon the hill. You bring your lamb. Jesus has the lampstand. Shall we say together? I bring my lamb. Jesus has the lampstand. So lampstand is stewarded by apostle, prophet, pastor, teacher, evangelist. Did you understand that? Let's go. And then from there, he sends us out to disciple the nation. Can you see the nation there? And nation is represented in 7 hills, 7 mountains. Next, other one, Asrini. Now that's the bottom there. What are those mountains called? Professions, education, religion, government, family, entertainment, media, sport, and business. I have put, there's a model from Bill Bright and Lauren Cunningham did this model together. You can increase the number of mountains, but you know, this is okay, isn't it? This is okay. And then can you bring the other one little into focus? There it is. So, apostle first, leader, prophecy, teacher, admin, deacon, mercy on the other side, pastor, HR, evangelist, marketer, the one who deals with money multiplication. Yeah, money multiplication. Will you please take this for a minute? This other document. And side number. I had an exercise to do, but we don't have time to do it. Okay. Yeah. That's why we have to have a lunch, and Dhiran said he'll organize it with a lunch and tea and all that. In his mind he said it. That's the word of discernment. Leadership 2021, I wanted to take time for you to write down, lead by Christ into the benefits, lead by Christ in adversity, how it was done for you or how you did it. Please don't lose this paper. Don't lose any of these papers. Then we shift over to the next page, number 4, fatherhood abilities. Yeah, fatherhood abilities. Now, if you are going to put Barnabas, where will you put Barnabas on that one? Where should Barnabas be? Huh? Big pardon? Big pardon. No, on this lampstand, which branch would be the Barnabas? Huh? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7? You think Barnabas should be 1. Any other? 1 and 2. Any others? Barnabas? I also think Barnabas should be 5, where he always was in difficult situations, making 2 ends meet, isn't it? Okay. Where would you put Mordecai? Where would you put Mordecai? He stood guard at the king's gate, but he had a pastoral charge over his cousin Esther. Was Esther Mordecai's cousin or niece? Cousin. Though he took her over when parents died. So where would you put Mordecai in that branch? Yeah, he was sort of pastoral care to Esther, watching her, and he was also watching the king's gate. Sort of little more difficult than Barnabas also, his situation, agree? Where Hamans are there and that kind of thing, he watched what king would go through. So would there be Christians who might be in that position in a nation? Would to God that every nation has Christians who are trained in governance in some way, either in the legislature, executive or judiciary, who will be in that place. Where would you put Daniel? No, easier one. Ezra? Where would you put Ezra? Ezra? Teacher, no? Ezra was a teacher. Where would you put Nehemiah? That's the thing. Nehemiah began as a humble butler. Imagine to a moody, capricious king, he's all the time trying to do the best. And he gets promoted to be governor of Jerusalem. That's like an apostle, isn't it? Yeah. Daniel? Classic office of prophet, but he was in governmental position also, which is very unusual. He had a good head to govern. Agreed. He was the chief of the, how many satraps? How many administrative districts? From Persia to India. Children, you have to go read these things here. Okay. I think our exercise is understood. So you can fit different characters in the Bible. We'll take some prayer.
Well, I thought after listening to all the case studies and all the things that were shared, that these offices of apostle, prophet, evangelist, teacher and pastor are widespread even in the working community. So I think a big takeaway, one of the greatest takeaways that we can get from this is that even though we are in the marketplace, there is a great call of God for us. So if you are an apostle or prophet, any of the ministries that are there, you are an apostle in the marketplace, you are a prophet in the marketplace, so which thins out the barrier between church and workplace. So I feel that we are reaching to a time, even in our ministry as a church, that the distinction between church and the marketplace is thinning out, so that we penetrate the workplace with the same force as we are in church. And because if you look at the Acts of the Apostles, the greatest churches were built by businessmen. You get Lydia in different cities, the seller of purple cloth. Then in different cities, it was the marketplace. Even Paul was a tent maker. So Philemon. So all those were marketplace leaders in the cities that brought the church together and formed the church. So it is, I think, our great privilege to look beyond the walls, because God is doing something great, and for us to move forward as a church as the God's called, gifted office with the various officers, because those officers will find fulfillment in the marketplace as well. So I think after listening to all this, what a rich heritage we have in bringing God's kingdom into the kingdoms of this world, because there is a scripture in Revelation which says the kingdoms of this earth have become the kingdoms of our God. So not only the church, but all the other areas must have the gospel. So I think that's a great takeaway.